Hi guys, it's Monday and that means it's Jazz on Waxing On. A couple of weeks ago we looked at one of my favorite big band drummers who was Buddy Rich, and today we're going to look at another one of my favorite drummers from the 70s, Billy Cobham. Now Billy Cobham wasn't only just a great drummer, he was also a composer, arranger, record producer, band leader. He really did it all. He had been with John McLaughlin and the Mahavishnu Orchestra, and then he branched out and started doing some solo projects. The first one that I'd seen was called Spectrum, and I don't have it on album, I only had it on CD. My first album by Billy Cobham was Crosswinds, and it was a little different from the Spectrum album. We had his more small group oriented on the first album. This one he kind of filled it out a little bit. We now have John Abercrombie on guitars, Michael Brecker on woodwinds, Randy Brecker on trumpet, Garner Brown on trombone, George Duke, keyboards. Now, he would keep this kind of format for the 3 or 4 albums that I'm going to talk about today, and these were all in that same period, from early 70s till about 1975, 76. Brecker Brothers were a major part of his sound, and it was really nice to have them as the backup band. So his group was often Brecker Brothers, John Abercrombie, and the trombone player sometimes would change. On this one, it was Garner Brown, I mentioned. And the whole album, written by Billy Cobham, but done kind of as a suite on side 1, called the Spanish Mass Sound Portrait. It takes up the whole side. There's 4 movements. Second side was more actual individual tunes. All of them again by Billy, probably the most popular, Crosswinds. The next album I purchased, Billy Cobham, Total Eclipse. Now this has pretty much the same lineup. Glenn Ferris has now taken over as trombone player. Other than that, we still have Abercrombie and both Brecker Brothers. And it's another one that is written, side 1 is basically a suite, solarization. And it's got a lot of things that are tied in with the solar system, Total Eclipse, Bandits, Moon Germs, The Moon Ain't Made of Green Cheese, Sea of Tranquility, Last Frontier, all along those themes. And again, great album, great backup band, and of course, Billy's work is just exceptional. The next album was a change up from the 2, and this was a live album. And it was Billy Cobham live in Europe called Shabazz. On this album, we now have Glenn Ferris on trombone, still the Brecker Brothers, and John Abercrombie. And it was, I think Shabazz was a brand new tune. 10th Pin, Red Baron, and Toria Matador were all kind of rehashes that he's doing live in Europe. And this was recorded at the Montreux Festival in 1974. Not a bad album. I found some of it a little less accessible than the first 2 albums. The live version, of course, always live albums are exciting to hear what these guys can do when they're not in the studio. Well worth checking out. My favorite one, and this is surprising, my favorite album, and I can't seem to find it around the house. I should have had it here, but I know it hasn't been that long since I've listened to it, but I just can't seem to put my hands on it. I'll show you if we can get that. Billy Cobham, A Funky Thiet of Sings. And this one was one where Billy didn't write all of the songs. He had some other writers in. We had a song by Keith Jarrett, another one by one of his musicians, 2 from the band, and it was more song-oriented. A little more accessible for most people, very recognizable melodies, but a really good album. And he brought in some extra players. Of course, on here, I mean, we're in New York, so why not Tom Bones Malone, who shows up on a lot of albums. I think this is the 3rd or 4th time we've mentioned him on the show. He was with Woody Herman, Blues Brothers, Saturday Night Live Band, David Letterman's band, now playing with Billy Cobham. So, if you're looking for something interesting, I haven't heard a lot lately. I have to confess, I kind of lost track of Billy Cobham after the mid-70s when I was listening to these albums. But it was some exceptional, exciting stuff he was doing then, and nice to feature the Brecker Brothers. Now, about the same time, just excuse me for a second. There we go. Well, at the same time, the Brecker Brothers were doing work of their own. And they had put out an album self-titled, called the Brecker Brothers. This album, produced by Randy Brecker. Yeah, Randy wrote all the songs, all the arrangements. He actually sings on one of the songs, which I don't think that's happens very often, so we'll get a chance to check that out. But it was the start of the Brecker Brothers band. They put out a number of albums. Again, some very recognizable players here. We got Randy and Michael Brecker. We got Dave Sanborn on alto sax, Don Grolnick on keyboards, Will Lee on bass. Now, you may recognize Will Lee as being David Letterman's bass player for a number of years. Ralph McDonald on percussion. And that was our first Brecker Brothers album. The follow-up to that was called Brecker Brothers Back to Back. Now, this one's getting a little slicker. Not so much jazz-oriented tunes. Not everything was written by Randy again. There's a couple of Michael tunes. There's a couple written by other people in the band. But the titles kind of tell the story. We've got If You Want a Boogie, Forget It. Keep It Steady, The Brecker Bump. They were getting more into, I don't really want to say dance music, but not quite the same feel they had with the original Brecker Brothers album, or certainly the kind of stuff they were doing with Billy Cobham. Now, just to take a look at the lineup on this album, of course, we got Will Lee back. We've got Randy, Michael, Dave Sanborn's back. Don Grolnick's back. We've added Steve Gadd on drums. Ralph McDonald on percussion. Lou Delgado playing baritone saxophone on one of the songs. Another great album to hear, the Brecker Brothers. Not quite the same style of music as the previous albums we've talked about. And I know they produced a couple more albums after this. These were the only two I had actually picked up. So today, while we're talking Billy Cobham as a drummer, also featuring some of the work of the Brecker Brothers together. And they often would record, as a team. So there's a few albums to take a look at. I always enjoyed Billy Cobham, a very unique style of drumming, whether you're listening with his group, Mahavishnu Orchestra. He recorded with Miles Davis as well. He was really in the forefront and winning a lot of polls during that early 70s period. But take a look. Yeah, he's on YouTube. He's on some of the streaming networks. Check out what he was doing back, well, goodness gracious, I hate to say it, about 45 years ago. So, okay, everybody have a great week. Stay home, stay safe, and we'll see you on Wednesday.